This poem's called Roubaix. Pillboxes have been spilled onto the fields. One lies uncapped, its lid flipped, then replaced, upside down. Spiders' legs of rebar feel their way out of the concrete. A flap of skin on my palm, a dead white sail, the raw pink beneath, blood as evidence that I am still alive. Evidence of handlebars pummeling my fleshy body, a retaliation by the machine for forcing it to ride this path. The cobbled farm track is an assault on the senses, on the standardized mentality that seeks out smooth roads. Here, common sense breaks with an annual regularity. The second Saturday, the second Sunday, every April, every year, le métier. Cyclical like the velodrome I am riding towards, the madness is certain, it will always come back around. Were I to break the continuity of the fields, it would only be for this chaos. The mechanized growing made secondary only for this brief moment. Labour of life is made sense of through this chosen suffering. My wiry fingers, bloody rubbed palms shake a calloused hand, weather-beaten. There is a mutual understanding, an unspoken familiarity of struggle, farmer, miner, soldier, rider. The ghosts of this land take more than sight to see. Mud covers everything in a fine film, stagnant water smell, an empty bottle of Yoipa, a crushed can, Stella Artois can, seedlings in a furrow. The Lion of Flanders roars in the chirping of a bird while the French tricolor flaps in the breeze. There are many lines here. They are bound to cross when they are drawn over each other. Astride my bike, contemplating, hands raw, upturned on my bars, ready to cross one smooth lane to seek out difficulty again. For life makes more sense if we choose the hard path. The easy things come easier once my brain has been rattled out of its skull. Hi, my name's Noah Maisie Smith. I'm a poet and sometimes writer and sometimes artist and other things. You can find me on Instagram at _Noah makes art _, or you can find my writing at noahart.substack.com. But there's links to my Substack from my Instagram page as well.
When was the first time you remember making a poem?
That's weirdly, that sort of awakened a memory. I think it must have been in primary school. I remember writing something. I don't really have much memory of it apart from just like a single like sort of still image frame of really, but I'm pretty sure there was something in when I was very young. But it's not exactly been consistent since then, but yeah, I did vaguely in school, yeah. When it first really properly got ignited for me was, I had a teacher so I did A-level English literature, I can't even remember now. And I had a really sort of inspiring teacher there, and he had so much passion for sort of creativity in the English language. And for that, we did a bit of writing, and I sort of have written since then. I remember writing sort of inconsistently since then. So it must have been like 16 or 17. And that was, yeah, I think I have a memory of sort of how I write now, which is where I just like inexplicably sort of start writing something in my head, and then I have to write it down before it like just disappears forever. And then I'm sort of just in like a state where I just have to finish it. Otherwise I sort of lose the momentum or lose the sort of space I was in. And that first one I sort of really remember was we had sort of Armistice Day, so 11th of November, day World War I ended. And I think I was really overcome with emotion from that, and sort of how horrific that whole conflict was and how pointless it was. And and the fact it was just very grey, it was very sombre, and we sort of made to stand in like lines in our forms, sort of like soldiers. And I think I was just really sad that it happened and that it still continues to happen. And I had started writing something in my head about halfway through the service, and I had to find some paper and just like start scribbling it down as quick as I could on my own, and I felt a lot better afterwards. I think there's a few of them early on like that, that were really sort of compelled about just getting an emotion out, and sort of writing it down by hand. That I unfortunately have not done a very good job of saving, which would be nice to go back and just see. It's really interesting to see like really sort of naive stuff you've done very early on and creative things, to see where you've come and just see also times where you're unencumbered by things that you think you should be doing creatively. So I'd like to go back and try and find it again in my papers, but I doubt I will be able to. Just sad.
When was it that you started identifying as trans?
I guess for a lot of trans people, there are lots of specific points where things change, and there's like a points of no going back, no return. And it's funny. I asked my friends, some friends, this before. It's like, well, when are people counting from when they say transness or transition? And everyone had a different answer. You know, some people say if they go down medical routes, they say when they started HRT. Some people say when they came out. Some people, you know, say when they were 3 years old. I think for me, some stuff started happening sort of after my dad died in 2023, where I sort of got into a queer relationship for the first time, really, and it was sort of like a snowball effect of things, and finally feeling comfortable in queer spaces, and like a sort of unlocking of myself that I've sort of repressed or been scared of for so long. And then there was a moment in sort of spring last year, maybe 2024, yeah, that I think I was reading something and I just sort of broke down crying, and I was just like, yeah, shit. Yeah, this is what it is. It's a trans. But it's been, so I think for me that's sort of the point. Just in bed on my own, reading this book and just wanting to feel seen for who I am. But that in itself is the end of a really long process of being able to understand myself and then being able to accept myself. And there's then also a beginning of a similar journey all over again, of having to then realise that and keep doing those same things of realisation and acceptance, which are really beautiful but also quite difficult at the same time. So, yeah.
Were you writing poems before that?
Yeah, so I'd been a bit on and off, and that a lot of them I was trying to make into like song lyrics. So I was always doing that, but the structure of musicals type lyrics is different, and you're thinking about pitch and rhythm in a slightly different way to what you would do even if it was like spoken word. At least I do. And again, it was emotional reactions to things and having a cathartic creative element to that. But I was also doing a lot more visual art creatively as well, so there was less focus on the poetry. And then I sort of had a bit of a falling out with visual art over the summer of last year, after really sort of pouring my heart into it for like 4 or 5 years. Yeah, then at some point at the start of 2024, I decided I was going to write and release a poem every week on my Substack, which was an absolute mission, but it really carried me through, and it was really interesting to look back on as like a sort of creative timeline, and you can see how my thought processes are changing every week. And it was as a foundational thing for creativity, the idea of practice, and that you have to keep doing things, and you have to keep repeating things, and you have to keep forcing yourself, and having that continuous repeating deadline really helped me get over some of the hurdles of making. And it was like a fun challenge, and I was just like, I'm just going to release something, I'm not going to worry too much about it. But then some of my favourite poems I've ever written are from that period. So at the start of this year, I finished 52 weeks. I somehow had 54 poems counting back, which I don't really understand how that had happened, because I don't think I did a double week. It felt like a slightly monumental achievement for myself, and I'd never really done anything that continuous, because all of my art is quite quick. I get it done, I get an idea out, I get it finished, and then I sort of can have a relationship and think about it once it's made. So to work continuously on something for a year was really special for me. And then I had a little celebration sort of open mic, and I made a zine with some friends. They illustrated some work with some poems that was particularly about grief for losing my father. And that was been really wonderful, just to work with other people again, rather than having just a completely insular practice. And to work with people who are much better at illustrating than I am. I'm not a drafts person.
When in that process, I guess, was it that you began to intentionally make poetry and stop trying to make lyrics for music?
That would have been some point in 2023, and I'd finished writing and recording a couple of little songs I did actually record with a friend, and that was really lovely. But the poetry came more naturally to me, and that I wasn't thinking about anything else. It was just the words and how the words work with each other. And I was frustrated with the lyrics, in that I was sort of trying to force something out. Like I was trying to write a bit of music, and I was like, well, what words go with this? What do I want to say? And it always felt forced, and I was trying to cram lyrics into a set space or rhythm, and I could never really get that done in a way that I was really very happy with. And I was like, I don't have to do that. I think it's letting myself not have to do that, and just be like, I can just do poems, and I feel better about the fact that I'm just writing poems.
So it was a freedom.
Yeah, there's freedom to it. I think that's what I enjoy, and that it's finding those points where, in creativity in life, where I'm not bound by what I think are other people's expectations of things. And I enjoy with poetry that feels most freeing to me creatively. And that I can do whatever. And that if I choose to have structure in a poem, that's because I've chosen it, and because I enjoy it, and I enjoy reading it. And it's not for anyone else. If they enjoy it, that's a wonderful, beautiful thing. But as long as I've made it, as long as I've shared it, then I've done my bit, and I'm totally content with that.
Do you have poems from before you identify as transgender that were about your cisgender identity?
I don't think any of them weren't about that in some way, even if it's not explicitly written in the poem, because I was every every waking moment in some ways was a struggle, and so much of my poor mental health and the emotions and difficulties that came from that found their ways into the poems were because of that. So I think in a maybe second-hand way, they are all about cisness or trying to identify as something that you're not, and they don't feel, none of them felt as freeing. They felt like a release of a emotion that's pent up and trying to write something down to get out of your head, but they weren't a particular release in any way because they couldn't do the thing that I was needing to do. Writing a poem can't enact the things that I've needed to enact in my life over the past, that I have over the past few years, or that I should have done earlier on.
What were you inspired by within those poems?
They would all, generally my poems then and now come from specific moments in time, specific spaces, or I feel something in a moment, or a lot of times I tend to read before bed, like when I'm in bed, and I'll be reading and I do that thing where I totally don't realise I've zoned out and I've started thinking about something. I'm looking at the page, I'm not reading, it's something I've read has made me think about something, and then being lost in my thoughts, something has started being writing and I'm like, oh shit, I should write that down, and I just grab my phone and I start writing, and then you know, sometimes it's 20 minutes later, sometimes it's an hour and a half, and I'm really tired. But yeah, it'd just be one point my brain leads to something else, and I just let all of the things I've ingested over my life and over that preceding couple of minutes, and let it sort of come out, and then I direct it as and when I can.
Have you noticed any differences between the poems when you identified as cisgender and the poems now?
I think the main differences between them now are firstly that they're not really wallowing in their own self-sadness so much, in that I don't like doing that anyway, and I don't get anything from that anymore. Yeah, all of my poems have tried to, art has always tried to reflect parts of my personal politics, and I feel that's more important than ever now, in trying to have positivity in my own freedom of self, and again, not wallowing in horrificness of the world in which we live currently, but also trying to inspire, at least in myself, some positive energy with which to then go out into the world and organise and to make change, because I need reminding of that, because I get so tired with everything. And if it helps somebody else do that as well, that's great. But again, you sort of have to make art for yourself first, and not worry about other people. So I think those are the two biggest differences.
Did you show any of those poems to anyone, the early ones?
No. Well, the odd person might have seen them, but I never went to an open mic and read any of them. I think I was just afraid. I was afraid of a lot of things, so they didn't really travel very far.
Did you have any poems about your queer sexuality?
I have a few, and again, they're all about sort of different parts of intimacy and sexuality. Some of them are more about freedom in terms of love, but a lot of them are really, at least in that period, based around being in that relationship and the things that were changing, and were sort of being, I was giving myself and were being given to me at that point. I always think it's really interesting to look back on really early, sort of naive creative work, because those are the points where sometimes you're most unencumbered by knowledge of other people, other creativity as a whole, and you feel like you don't feel like you should be doing anything in particular. You're just doing, you're just making the work. I feel sorry for the person that wrote them, for the sadness in some of them as I remember them. And I wish I could sort of go back and tell that person the things that I know now. I think I have a little bit of sorrow and sort of like, oh, I wish I could have been different, but it's also like there's that bit of happiness of like, well, I am different now, and it took a while, but I'm getting there. So it's nice to remember that change as well.
Do you feel like you have to do something now, like make something? Because you said before then you didn't have an idea of creators.
I think everyone feels like that with creative stuff, or at least a lot of people I've talked to. It's another step of societal expectations that certain forms of media should be certain things, that there are sort of unspoken boundaries and rules within certain styles of media, or like, you know, genres of music or forms of poetry and things like that. People get nervous and scared by creativity as a whole because I guess you know, society has generated a fear around it that it should be something that can be saleable, you know, that you can make money from. It's something, you know, it has that real weight of expectation upon it. And that is, you know, part of any creative's practitioner's sort of learning is really unlearning those kind of societal expectations, implicit biases towards certain types of doing and thinking, and then being able to make those decisions explicitly for yourself. Even if you choose to stay within them, you can say exactly to yourself why you're making a decision. It's making something because you want to make something, and that is the most empowering and wonderful feeling, and that's sort of what I strive for. My decision is to do more. My decision is to, as someone that finds the world very taxing, that has chronic fatigue, that has to make decisions every day about my own energy levels, that I have to decide every day to wake up to spend some of my energy going to work, but then definitely spend some of my energy on being creative, because that's what I enjoy, and I don't see any point in being alive if I'm not going to do the things that I enjoy, and to make the decision to remember that I enjoy I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy that I love being alive, and I enjoy being who I am. And I think that's a decision I make every day. I think that's all of those things are implicitly part of my practice because it is part of my life.
Yeah, have you changed any of your older poems?
I don't edit things once they're done. Okay. I think that's another thing, a part of making art that is really difficult, is letting go. Especially when you're making something that is emotional and really personal, is that you put your work in, you get it to a point that you are happy with in that moment, and then at a point you just have to make a decision to release it out into the world, and at that point it's done, but it will always mean something to you possibly differently in the future. It'll always mean something and be read differently by every single person on the planet, and you can't do anything about that or change that once it's gone. And that's, I guess, part of being a communicator is you can only say as much as you have time for, and at some point you have to end a sentence.
When did you first do your first performance?
The earliest I can remember that was kind of poetry was I made this weird, like, first year of art school, I made this weird sort of electronic beat, and then like plain verse, a sort of set of song poem things, a bit like a little bit Sleaford Mods kind of vibe, and I performed those at the uni at like a sort of a night we had. That was a powerful moment. That really gave me a bug in creating. Yeah, that was a really powerful moment, and I'd spent a lot of time making some really, really shit music, but the words were really powerful to me, and the performing and that having that sort of relationship to an audience, and that, like with the writing of the poems and having that place to get the emotion out, not just onto the page, but then out again, and sharing that emotion with people was a really powerful standout moment. And it's one of those moments I look back on and be like, why didn't I do more of that after that?
Have you performed at queer venues?
I was very fortunate to get a sort of feature spot at the Queer Creative London's first poetry open mic. And that was really great, because that was wonderful, because first sort of like feature, well, sort of a great feature set from somebody I didn't really know before, and it was at Common Press, the bookshop just off the top of Brick Lane. Following the things that you really enjoy and that mean a lot to you are what take you to the places that you want to go.
Have you noticed the difference between the queer venues you've performed at and the non-queer venues?
I guess not hugely. I think one of the things that I have found solace in queer venues and spaces is the feeling of being home and actually being truly relaxed in a space that isn't my home. And the poetry nights that I go to, explicitly queer or otherwise, are places which make at least myself, or I would hope everyone, feel equally at home and at welcome in order to perform for the first time, for the 1000th time, for a brand new piece of work, for an established classic on the scene that people love. I haven't found a difference there, but that's because I would only choose places that make everyone feel comfortable. And if I go somewhere that doesn't feel like that, I ain't ever going back, because that defeats the point of it for me. You need those spaces where you can feel at home to be what you are, to be that in public and not be on your own. Same as like you need to build confidence in yourself and share your creative endeavors with people you feel comfortable with first, to build that sort of resilience, be like, I am confident in my work. Other people might not like it, I don't care. And there's a real parallel there. And there's a lot of spaces in London where queer spaces which I go to be myself when I don't have another space to do it. And they are, really wonderfully important to me.
What about the non-queer venues? Have you performed the trans poems there?
I've done a couple. I sometimes just perform them without saying anything about myself. There's still a bit of, again, comfort there in just reading the poem and letting the poem be what it is. But sometimes getting the words out to people, which I don't know, is sometimes tricky, because I don't know how people are going to react. And I just need to get better and telling them to fuck off if I think they're going to have a bad reaction.
This is a fear.
Yeah, fear. I guess just an implied fear. And any time anything, dodgy, hate crimey has been said to me, I've always handled it quite well. So it's just more getting more experience at people hating on me, and then me dunking on them. So I shouldn't need to be afraid, and I shouldn't be afraid of who I am. Nobody should be, really, as long as they're not doing anything hateful or awful. The ones that are about my truest self, I tend to perform or write in a way that I'm quite happy with, so they always go down pretty well, because people respect things that are genuine.
Was there a sense of vulnerability, or is there a sense of vulnerability when you perform those poems that comes along with the fear or the perception?
There is with all bits of art that are so honest about yourself. I think any artist has to be really cautious if they're being that bare with themselves, because you're then making something which then people will, intentionally or otherwise, like, critique. And then there can be that thing where you feel like they're critiquing your inner self, and that's really unpleasant. So you have to sort of psych yourself up for that and be ready for that. And that's sort of what I meant before about, at some point you just have to end a sentence and let it go. And that's one thing you have to learn. If you want to write about these things, you have to be okay in it being. So there is a vulnerability in that. It's implicit to the whole nature of writing something or making something like that. But I find that helpful in a way, in that if I am to be open and honest with the world about myself, it's sort of like forcing me to train myself to say it out loud. Because it's vulnerable being on stage, it's vulnerable writing and posting it online without much gap between you finishing it and it being published. And there's vulnerability in being alive. So it's all like stacked on top of each other.
Do you ever foresee yourself stopping writing poetry?
I hope not. I have had a habit of jumping between things and having moments of doing one thing, moments of doing another, even if those moments last several years. But then so there is a little bit like, oh, I hope I don't just let this slide. But then I do love it. And I remember that I did, when I was a kid, I sort of did that with sports and activities until I found something that I truly loved, and cycling, and I've never let that go. And I know for a fact that times where I've done it less, I've been significantly unhappier or dysregulated. And I think it's the same with poetry. The only real reason I might stop is if I just forget myself for a bit. The same reason I wanted to do music is I just love being in gigs, being in performance spaces. I love seeing other people perform their work. I love performing their work. I get such an energy from that, is that I don't see myself stopping that. And it doesn't have to be on the biggest stage at all. It just has to be sharing it with people and not being, part of it's not being insular. It's part of it is being really living in a community that is making and sharing things with each other. And again, that's another thing that I can't let myself forget. If the way in for me for doing that is poetry, then that's great. double win. If you've made it to the end of this interview, thank you very much. Thank you for sticking with my words. I hope some of them might resonate with you, and that you also find your own way to be creative in a sustainable way for your own mental health and physical health, because it's wonderful and everyone should be doing it, no matter where you are with it, as long as you're doing it for yourself first. Trans rights, fuck war, free Palestine, free Sudan. Fuck this world, but we must come together. We must have we must have community and organise, only through bringing people in that we don't, who are maybe have energy misplaced in the wrong places, can we move forward together? It's not to excuse anything, but we can't let other people go. We can bring them with us. Yeah. This poem's called Being With You. Being with you is bad for my teeth. The days we spend together turn into nights which fall back into days, and I never remember my toothbrush. Being with you is the taste of coffee we make together deep into the day, grinders, mocha pots, eye contact, warmth, sweet smells and comfort. Being with you is knowing your bed, the intimate nature of the vessel of rest, its dips, hard spots, the best pillows for our heads, our arms and our legs. Being with you is dressing my best because I would accept nothing less, knowing that you couldn't care less, that it's not about how we dress. Being with you is being with you. Life at its most unpoetic reality. Best as hyperbole. It is what it is, and I could ask for nothing more.